So we have three mayors here. These are mayors that are on the front lines and have been working to deal with the question of banning the box and making it work. You're the newest. You just got into office.
July 1.
July 1st. But you come from an accounting background. And sometimes when you're dealing with accounting, you count what you spend, but you also count what you save. As you think about banning the box, and you think about going even further, what do you see as some of the economic benefits to your city?
Well, I mean, there's certainly an economic argument to make, and that has to be made for logic and reason. But in my opening remarks, what really tugged on me, and I think Kevin said this early in his remarks, that the epiphany, this has to be real for you, and that's really a personal issue. That's what I experienced, as I described, long before I ran for or held elected office. And then over the course of the campaign, having visited the operation and having spent time in all over neighborhoods all over our city, this really is a personal issue. This is about families. When you start talking about public safety, one of my big investments is investing in at-risk kids, for example. So if you take an ex-offender that may have children, if that person can't get a job, not only does it have an impact on the choices that they're going to make, if you're faced with 2 or 3 bad choices, and that is say, I can't get a job, now I got to figure out another way to make a living, not only is that bad for the individual, but that's bad for their family and the children that are around them.
Well, Andrew, first of all, I've known Andrew Gillum for a while. I don't think I knew you when you were 23. I probably knew you when you were 25, though. Yeah. So, and you've been such an extraordinary leader, both on voter registration and children's issues and all these other issues and causes. First of all, why don't you speak? Since you said let's keep it personal, why do you care so much about this issue, and what's made you become such a leader on it?
Yeah, thank you, Van, and thank you to all of you all who are doing the important work in our communities to move issues like this and others forward. One, I should share, I'm one of 7 children, and all boys and 1 girl. In fact, my little sister is in this room. She works for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And
Stand up.
Where you at, Ms. Gillum? Over here to the left.
Yay!
And she's the only girl, and she's the baby. My mother was a determined woman, and she's got a bunch of brothers. But one of our brothers actually did time. And I know my brother because we grew up together. I know that his upbringing was the same as my upbringing. My mother was a school bus driver and my daddy was a construction worker. And my grandmother was the one who would get us off to school very early in the mornings. And so it's very, very easy for people to demonize individuals when all you have to look at is either a check box or you hear that they have had a criminal background history. It's another thing entirely, mayors, as you know, when you've got a personal relationship with someone. And while I'm convinced at this point that there are lots of societal reasons why we have to do the right thing, I was brought first to this because it was extremely personal with a relative. And I know what it was like for him coming out, trying to reset the record, trying to get a job. He has actually ended up resorting to, and this was a good thing, I guess, but starting his own business. He does detailing. He does cars and he power washes buildings and homes. But he had to do that, not because he was so entrepreneurial, which I'm proud of him for now, but because he had no other way to provide for himself, for my niece, for his wife now. And that's all this man wanted to do when he got out of jail, was to make a way for himself and for his family.
Well, that's well. First of all, anybody working at the Southern Poverty Law Center deserves our own round of applause. So please give, what's your sister's name?
Monique.
Give Monique a round of applause for doing the great work with Morris Dees and the other great heroes. And speaking of great heroes, we have Mayor Gilbert here. Obviously, you lead, I believe, the largest majority African American town in Florida.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah.
And is it Miami Gardens?
It's Miami Gardens.
Miami Gardens.
Miami Gardens.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're not quite in the Everglades, but
not quite there.
we're the home of the Miami Dolphins. So you all pray for us. Pray for us.
Watch it.
Yeah.
I'm a Dolphin fan, but
We had a good ball game with y'all earlier this year.
yeah, no, you all are good compared to us,
Yeah.
But it's interesting that and I know that mayors will always try to take credit for things that work, whether they did them or not. But this wasn't. I can't really take any credit for this. The first mayor of the city. I'm only the second mayor of our city. We incorporated in 2003. But I went to all of the city council meetings. I wasn't elected. I would just go sit in the audience. And I remember the first mayor, Shirley Gibson. She said that it'll be the policy of this city that we will give everybody a chance. So you won't be disqualified because you have a criminal record. And so now and we've confronted the issue with regard to employees, with regard to volunteers, with regard to coaches, and we balanced out the state laws and the county requirements. But you can walk through our public works system and you can talk to people who did time. And so and from our perspective, we have a lot of people who are returning home. And that's what it is. They're returning home and they're going to live with their mother or their girlfriend or their wife or their sister or their husband or they're going to live with someone, and them being able to reacclimate themselves to society is important, because if they can't, it's a problem.
Let me just say something. What you just said really struck me. Language matters. And you said people returning home. Yeah. You didn't say ex-offender. You said people returning home. And I just want to, we might need to take that phrase higher. Because when you think people returning home, a whole different part of your brain starts operating. Why do you use that people returning home language?
Well, because that's what it is. And so I don't, my dad was a Baptist pastor, and I'm a lawyer by trade and a former prosecutor, and I've sent people to prison. But we don't exile people indefinitely. So if we don't exile them indefinitely, that means they're going to come back home one day. Mm-hmm. And when they come back home one day, it's not just for them, but it's for their neighbors. It's for their families. It's incumbent on us to have pathways that allow people to come back home and become productive members of society.
Well, let me ask some of the tougher questions, because you're leaders and you have to deal with this stuff. We've been hearing a lot of things that, for instance, people are now saying you have the violent crime rate and other statistics nationwide are beginning to move in the wrong direction. Can you talk about the importance, therefore, of having a very comprehensive approach as we try to back away from this excessive incarceration strategy, and maybe the importance of reentry being a part of that? Maybe you could go.
Yeah, sure. Here in Jacksonville, we talk about prevention, intervention, and enforcement.
As a comprehensive strategy, not just
strategy.
This or that,
That's
but
right.
all together.
And so one of the things, another side of this argument, the wrong side of this argument, would suggest that if you engage in this, that you're soft on crime. That we just need to state clearly that's not true. To be clear, we have to enforce, where crime exists, we have to enforce, because the people of our cities and of our country need to be safe. But if all we're doing is adding more police officers, which I'm for, so we can enforce, but if that's all we're doing, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, we're going to continue to face the same situations. We're going to ignore children that are being left behind by no choice that they've made. So it's important that we invest in the reentry programs, which not only gives the individual hope, opportunity, the ability to earn a wage for them and their family and a purpose for their lives, because a job's really about purpose, right? It's not just about money, it's about purpose. But it also gives opportunities for their family and their children.
Yeah, I'll say, because this whole comprehensive has been a major theme for us in our community. So ban the boxes, yes. And I have to say, it's probably one of the lowest thresholds of reform that you could probably ask for if you were dealing with criminal justice reform writ large. So we also have adult civil citations. Which, by the way, I understand that there's a prosecutor in my area who wants to withdraw their support for civil citations because the court fees that they've been collecting have gone so far down that they may have to lay off 2 staffers. talk about a successful program. So not only does it make good sense for the safety and security of your community, but it also is a smarter approach, bringing down the recidivism rate and helping us to streamline out some of the positions that are no longer needed in the government. We got adult civil citations, youth civil citations. We also run this program in Tallahassee called Community Connections, which is a theory, sort of our own local name under a restorative justice principle that is much more comprehensive. And basically, our judges have agreed to, instead of adjudicating young people before the court of law, they send them to Community Connections, where they sit before a community panel, Ms. Jackson and them, who have conversations, ask them questions. Why did you do what it is that you did? And then if the victim chooses, can sit directly across from you or next to you and tell you how what you did impacted them. We've seen in the 2 years that we've been running that program a 94% success rate, where in 1 year after their completion, they have not gone on to recidivate. Now compare that to our current recidivism rates among youth, which is well above 50%. In our community, hovers around 70%. But I'll just say more comprehensively, it's difficult to talk about reentry if we're also not going to talk about restoration of rights, civil rights, when you've paid your debt to society, or the programs that prevent and discriminate with regard to housing and where you can live. You got folks who can't be with their baby mama and their children because there are policies that prevent people who have had criminal background histories from living in certain places. And so comprehensive also means dealing with the economic and the housing, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and being able to connect them with community that keeps them, I think, committed, but also accountable to making sure they stay on the right track.
So Mayor, you are dealing with a new city with old problems.
Yes. Yes, and I have a very balanced view on those things. And so, like, for instance, the housing issue, right now we don't have balance. There's just a rule. If you have these convictions, you can't live there. You can't have that hard line of a rule. But the opposite is also probably not true, because what will happen is, and what has happened is, you have people who come back home who have not left out their old ways, and that in certain housing areas that becomes problematic. So. I think we need to restore balance to the system. Look, Andrew said something. The mayor here, he said something. Banning the box is the lowest bar. What about all of the things that state law prohibits you from doing if you have a record? What about stuff like that? What about the idea that we need to start training people and preparing them for reentry? If someone goes in with an addiction problem and they don't have an addiction problem because they can't get drugs, they come out with an addiction problem. If they go in and they cannot read and they aren't taught to read, they come out with a literacy problem. Right now, we're recycling problems, and we're acting surprised when the people with problems come home and they have the same problems. We are acting surprised. It shouldn't be surprised. So yeah, we do need a comprehensive view, and we need a commitment. And so when you talk about policies that could work, if the legislature ever decides to reauthorize enterprise zones, I would love to see a component of that be who you're willing to hire. Not just the geographical area, and not just the people who live in that area, but very specific subgroups, because not everybody in every area is having employment problems. Some people are very employable. Some people are not. So we need to find ways to incentivize not just government, but private employers to say, hey, you know what? I'm willing to take a shot on this person who might have done something in the past, but you know, as a prosecutor, I used to go out and talk to people, and I say most people, 75% of everyone in this room has committed a felony of some sort. You just didn't get caught. You did not get arrested. You were not convicted. Even if it's going 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, that's a felony too.
Hey, Van, just real quick on the point, because I understand the point that Mayor Gilbert is making with regard to housing and not putting people back in situations where they perpetuate the problems that led them there. But maybe part of the solution isn't in relieving some of these housing restrictions. It might be in our approach to how we situate housing in our community. Maybe it isn't building 30% area AMI housing all clustered together. Maybe it is 70%, 120% AMI, where you get income levels that are diversified so that you can prevent some of the recycling.
Part of the thing with Andrew has been his problem his whole life. He's so much smarter than the rest of us, and it's hard to keep up. What is the AMI?
So
is that like a rap group?
So area median area, which he's playing me right now. You all know this. It's area median income, but basically the person who's living there is making 30% of what the community average is for income levels. And so what you have there are folks who are by and large in abject poverty, and the way we do housing writ large in this country is we segregate people by what they can afford. There are housing policies, progressive strategies out there that say you're going to, for all new developments, you're going to have diversified housing. You'll meet housing in a single neighborhood or a single development that hits various income tracks so that you don't find yourself in economic segregation.
Gotcha. Well,
yeah, I just would like to add that I'm a fiscal conservative. So if 10 years ago you would have suggested to me that I'd be sitting on a stage talking about funding these kind of programs, they just didn't make any sense to me. Kevin, you said something similar. But I know that I was wrong. When you talk about a comprehensive strategy, one of the things that we did here in Jacksonville years ago, mid-2000s, there was two mayors ago, John Payton, created this thing called the Jacksonville Journey, which was a comprehensive look at all legs of the stool, the comprehensive approach to investing in at-risk youth, to reentry programs, to housing, etc. Those programs over the last few years, they weren't defunded, but they just weren't taken seriously. It's something that I'm committed to, that I've funded in my first budget and will continue to increase funding in the years ahead. I say that because we can debate how we do the housing, how we do the reentry programs, but we have to be committed to funding them. Government plays a role in that, and I stand here as a fiscal conservative telling you that we must step up and show that we're committed with our dollar.
Hear, hear.
I'd like to stay with you on this because you must have these conversations in places, in rooms that are tougher than this room. And so what are some of the what are some of the arguments that you're finding that do get over? Obviously, the personal piece is key because that aligns at the heart level. But what are some of the arguments that you hear, and what have you found? I mean, look, you knocked off an incumbent. That's hard to do. You're taking a stand that is becoming more popular, but is still not the most popular position on this question. What are some of the arguments that you're finding that are working?
Well, I go back to the personal. Look, I have spent time, continue to spend time with at-risk youth, with adults that have been in trouble.
Why do you do that?
Because there's nothing more powerful than looking someone in the eye. Someone looks me in the eye and tell me why they made a decision when they were 12 years old, and when they explained the circumstances that they were in, I can't tell you I wouldn't have made the same decision. So what I tell people...
But you have friends that don't do that.
Right.
They have positions, they have political opinions, they're smart people, but they're not going out there putting their hands on people. What is making you do that? Is it your mama, your daddy? I mean, help me understand why you're doing it.
Well, I was raised, my mom and dad raised me that we love everyone. We care about everyone. But, I grew up, became an adult, went into business. And look, man, I had my personal experience with one person when I was in the private sector. When I decided to run for office, I decided to run all over this city, go everywhere, every neighborhood, and talk to everyone. And I experienced some things that I didn't know existed in my city that touched me and changed me and moved me in a real way. And I think it's important that now that I'm in office, I continue to have those conversations for me personally, so I can keep it real, but I can also take those stories into boardrooms, conference rooms, speeches, Q&A sessions, and even if someone doesn't agree with my position, I can personalize it. And then I can encourage them to engage as well. And I got to tell you, it's been I really haven't had much resistance. When I tell this, when I sit in a boardroom and explain to someone that a 24-year-old man that has now turned his life around told me when he was 12 years old that someone broke into his house, he's got a single mom, and he had nowhere to go, and he had to make a decision how to protect his mother. That hits home.
Really good. Well, look, I just think that kind of hands-on leadership deserves a round of applause. So I just appreciate that. That's really good. That we need more of that in both political parties. You're that kind of a leader.
Well, no, I mean, well, I was going to speak to. I'm not a conservative on most things. Probably folks would call me a liberal, which I'm totally fine with. But I consider myself extremely progressive about moving our community forward. And when I talk to members of our chamber, when we did ban the box, because it wasn't all the way heralded by everybody. There were folks who I thought were philosophically aligned with me who didn't roll out the red carpet. They said things like, "Are we going to have child molesters playing with our kids in parks and our senior citizens being taken advantage of?" Right, when we send utility workers to their homes, and so we had to fight that back a little bit. But what our chamber did understand, and it's not just chamber, but I want to use them as an example, is that they didn't like when Tallahassee showed up as a violent crime rate city in the state of Florida, number one by numbers, right? Not by percentages. Or when we were written up by a national publication as being one of the most economically segregated and unequal cities in the nation. They don't like statistics like that when you're trying to recruit business and industry in. And so there's actually philosophy that is promulgated out on your part of the country called targeted universalism, which is when you see a problem in a particular area, you go and you spend the resources in a targeted way. And if you solve it there, you solve it universally for the community. And so when we're talking about crime in our community and why the north side has to pay attention to what's happening on the south side, it's because we don't want our city written up as one of those places where you don't want to go because it's hard to do business. Business owners know, and corporations know, you don't want to be a place where you have deep economic segregation and frustration that might result in people committing more crimes.
Ben, one of the things, and I wanted to ask, I have cousins and friends and the people I went to high school with and the people I played high school football with who broke the law, and they're back home now. I hang out with them because they're my friends. They're my family. And I would no sooner disown them than I would new friends. I cannot do that. That's not how I'm built. So then the question becomes, should they be full participants in the community? Should they be able to do that? And so, yeah, you have to look at, what they've done. You're not going to have a child molester or someone with a sex crime with the kid. But that's just the example that people use to scare you away. That's what they use.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we hear that like every time, and I just don't think anybody has ever proposed that. I've never heard that proposal. What are some of the categories? And I want all of you to hit this if you can. What are some of the categories that you think are either with your ban the box are making real improvements? Like obvious kind of no-brainer stuff where somebody could have done a job, is now doing a great job, should be able to do a great job, but because of help us understand so we can have some other examples than the same thing they always bring out, which nobody has proposed.
What we actually have in Miami Gardens is we have an ordinance that actually describes what this will disqualify you from this, and it's based on basically the state statute.
What it's based on what?
The state statute. So the state statute talks about, if you're working in, half of our employees are sworn police officers.
Half your employees are what?
Sworn police officers. So we have around 470, between 470 and 490 employees, depending on who the manager fires. And half of them are sworn police officers. You cannot have a record and work there. So that's set. But state law says what it says about sex crimes, drug crimes. You can't work on a park with a kid. So those things are going to be automatic disqualifiers. So the most of the time, where they actually end up, if you come to Miami Gardens, you apply for a job, where you will end up working is probably in public works. It's probably actually in City Hall. So that's where we see people with criminal records, and we don't identify them as people with criminal records.
And one of the things, I mean, you say that so kind of right now the state law does knock out certain people, and you're trying to work around that in terms of where you place people, not knocking people out automatically or in an overly broad way. Um, Let me just ask you a question, though. This is the tougher question. Um, is it possible for people to be redeemed? Let's take we'll take the sex offenses out of it because that's a completely different thing. But you do have people who have committed acts of violence. You have people who've committed serious property crimes. You have people who've committed not just drug crimes in terms of using drugs, but selling drugs. And sometimes I feel like our conversation, we will very quickly go to the most sympathetic case, the nonviolent drug offender, et cetera, et cetera. At what point do you think that this movement needs to begin to take on the tougher questions of except for there's a narrow band, but isn't there a much broader band of people who can be redeemed? Is there some way for someone to earn their way back, to be given a broader set of opportunities than maybe state law right now will allow?
I think that they can be redeemed, and I think the time to ask those questions and to start having those conversations is probably right now. And what you're going to find is people generally they'll say yes, but when it comes to putting someone who had a violent crime as a recreational superintendent on a park, they won't want to do it. I look at crime differently because I guess I was raised in the area where I saw some degrees of crime. I went to law school. I became a prosecutor. When I was prosecuting people, I would tell, when I was getting ready to send them to prison at sentencing, I don't judge, we're not judging the doer, we're judging the deed. And I think sometimes people get it confused. They think that they're one and the same. My uncle, he used to say that the streets are gonna eat. And I didn't really fully understand that until I had to understand that there is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People are gonna have some place to live. They're going to have food. They're not going to choose not to have clothes. If they don't have a path to provide for themselves, they're going to find a path to provide for themselves. If you take them out of that situation, you give them the opportunity to do something else, I think that most people will do something else. And so I think that there is redemption out there, but we need to really embrace that as a community, as a national community, because right now we're not doing that.
Well, they can be redeemed. Jack Abramoff was teaching ethics in my city yesterday. I don't know how many. A big old speaker series on accountability, government reform. Jack Abramoff. But so each of us have talked personally about how we may have come to this based off of some personal experience, exposure, so on and so forth. But there are a lot of people in our communities who don't make that connection, who don't have a personal story to share. One of the things that I have learned from the LGBT movement is the compelling stories of folks who are unlikely allies who have come around on that issue have mainly pointed to a relative, a son, a daughter, a cousin. And so one of the things that our staff has thought about is how do we give everyone that experience, the people who are least our allies on this, that experience. And so this summer, we, with our summer jobs program, in addition to the one outside the government, was identifying employers all throughout our community to receive 100 young people. And we intentionally went for young people who were referred to us by the Department of Juvenile Justice or who went through our Community Connectors program and put those individuals over a course of 8 weeks in employment opportunities all around the city. And we really tried to make sure we were getting good people, right? Because we needed them to have good experiences and good exposure so that when it came around next year to deploying this program, we had 100 business leaders, owners, so on and so forth out there saying, man, my experience with Andrew last summer was amazing. This guy worked hard. He showed up on time, so on and so forth, because that gives them the narrative, right? I'm no longer preaching to them about the benefits here. They're the acolytes. They're the folks who are saying, man, this is what we need. We need more of it. And then we reveal to them, man, did you know Johnny had a history? The Secretary of Juvenile Justice, Christy Daly, is telling us some of the horrific stories, traumatic experiences that this young man has made it through. You didn't know that because when he showed up on time for work, hungry for that opportunity, you didn't realize that this was the This was the trajectory moment that was going to change the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kind of experiences I think we have to elevate and escalate for individuals.
Well, Mayor, I'll give you the last word. First of all, I just want to thank you for being here. I know your schedule is crowded as everyone else. I think you stayed a little bit longer than you're supposed to. So I want to give you an opportunity to say the final word on this panel.
Well, again, I just want to say welcome to Jacksonville, and we're always looking to add to our tax base. So check out our city.
No. No.
I would say just on the prevention intervention piece, you just talked about it with the jobs programs. I'm going to be rolling out my programs in the months ahead, and the speeches that I give now, and I'm going to do a big sort of community call to arms. I'm asking everybody in my city to engage with an at-risk youth, engage and have an experience. I'm going to preach this and beat this drum my entire term. So the more people that have a personal experience, the more they are likely to engage. And I'll just close with this. Whether it's the issue we're talking about today or whether it's housing, often as political leaders, when you engage, people will tell you, oh my gosh, if you touch that, there's 10 other things, and how you can allocate your resources. And I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but Mother Teresa said, if you've got a problem in front of you, someone is in need in front of you, meet that need. And then I'll add to that, it will become exponential.
Amen.
All right. Well done. Thank you very much, mayors. Mayoral leadership. All right.
Okay, folks, we're going to take a break till about 2:40, so you got about 12, 15 minutes, and we'll look forward to getting you back upstairs in the breakout session rooms. Thank you. Great job, Van and Mayor. We appreciate you.